Hello, today's Bible study comes from 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 15 through 18. Yeah, 15 through 18, and reads as follows. But I have not used any of these rights, and I am not writing this in the hope that you will do such things for me, for I would rather die than allow anyone to deprive me of this boast. For when I preach the gospel, I cannot boast, since I am compelled to preach. Woe to me if I do not preach the gospel. If I preach voluntarily, I have a reward. If not voluntarily, I am simply discharging the trust committed to me. What then is my reward? Just this, that in preaching the gospel I may offer it free of charge, and so not make full use of my rights as a preacher of the gospel. Well, after Paul wasn't using his rights to be paid or to be taken care of, um, Paul says, hey, I don't have to claim them at all. He says, I have used none of these things. Hey, he said, yeah, you should support me. I have the right to be supported, but I didn't take that right. I didn't take advantage of that situation. I did not receive payment. And he says, nor have I written these things. Paul wasn't telling them he was looking for money. Um, Paul is just explaining to them about the rights to either take or not take them and why they are afforded. And he gives them examples and reasons why it is stated the way he has stated it. But that's not what his main goal was, for him personally to take advantage of it. Paul was just telling them these things. It would be better for me to die than that anyone should make my boasting void. Paul wasn't bragging on the fact that he preached. I don't want anybody to think that, because he was not. Paul was really saying, I preached because when he was on the road to Damascus, it was put on him. His boast that he does have here, though, was that as he shared the word with believers and non-believers, he didn't ask for support. Paul worked. And remember, they had a problem with Paul because he did work. They had a problem with manual labor. They didn't like that. And Paul worked with his hands. And Paul was not afraid to work. Paul will tell him about it. Hey, I didn't ask you for anything. I work with my hands. I have no problem doing work to support myself. And then he goes, woe to me if I do not preach the gospel. This was not Paul's, this wasn't something he just said, I'm going to just do this now. And it didn't seem like in his life it was a trek he was headed into until he got met on the road. We have to remember that Paul was called to do this. When he had that intervention with Christ, this was not an option. This was something he had to do. He was specifically called, and he had to fulfill his obligation to the Lord. Remember the process that he went through: knocked down, blind, sad, spit on his eyes, baptized, preaching. Paul was called to do this, and he went about it. And we knew he was going about it. And he says to him, if I do this willingly, if I do this willingly, some of you might not support the ministry, but it has nothing to do with my choice or that choice. My circumstances have me doing this. But if I don't get any support from anybody, willingly, then they have a reward. If it was going against his will that he is not supported, then Paul has a different thing. He has stewardship toward the situation that's different. He presents the gospel of Christ for free. See, Paul wasn't out there trying to make a dollar or increase his personal gain. Paul did this for free. And he was aware of how it was when people had personal gain and wealth and all that from preaching and getting paid for it. And Paul wasn't trying to be that way, nor did he want to be perceived that way. So he didn't abuse his situation, his authority, or anything. And for Paul, that was a huge reward. I didn't pay it. I preached it willingly. I didn't take anything from you. I still continued to work and I still preached the word. But Paul wants you to know that he did have an option. His option was not to accept anything. And Paul was writing to him and telling him this. And this was Paul's right. He said, I'm not going to claim this payment. I'm just going to keep preaching willingly and taking care of myself with my own hands. And although you may look down on me, and although you may think my preaching is not as high as somebody else's that receives payment, I do this willingly because I've been called to it. I've been commanded to preach the gospel. Amen.